everyone, and welcome back to Global Education Zone. And in this particular episode of our mathematics course for Senior Secondary School 1, we'll be dealing with the topic ratios, rates, and proportions. Now, let's start from ratios. What's a ratio? A ratio is basically just like a fraction, but basically you make use of colons to represent the two terms. You know that in a fraction you represent your terms A over B. But in a ratio, yes, A over B. But if you are asked to convert this fraction into a ratio, that means it will be A colon B. That's read as A ratio B. So that's how you express ratios. So that's how you convert from fractions to ratios. If we were to convert this fraction to a ratio, that would be A over B will be converted to A ratio B. That's one method. Now, ratios is basically a comparison between two or more quantities. Let me give an example. Now, if a ratio is equal to another ratio, there are some methods we use to solve them. And if you've heard of the method of cross multiplication and so on and so forth, and even the use of LCM or lowest common multiple, you can use those methods to simplify comparison of ratios. Let's give a question. If 57 ratio 95 is equal to 12 ratio x, find x, evaluate x. So we are given that 57 ratio 95 equals 12 ratio x, and then we're asked to find x. Now, when you are given ratios, you can't evaluate ratios the way they are, so you have to convert them to fractions so that they will be easier to simplify. Now, 57 ratio 95 is also equivalent to 57 over 95. That will be equals to, put the equals to sign. Then on the right hand side we have 12 ratio x. So 12 ratio x is also equivalent to 12 over x in fraction. 12 over x. Now, having done this, the next part of the question, we are going to simplify the question. These are two fractions. How do we simplify? We can multiply both sides by 95. We can multiply both sides by x. But to make everything easier and to do it in one step, just cross multiply. And how you cross multiply? You multiply the terms that are opposite each other. That are diagonally facing each other. This term, the term diagonally facing each other in these four terms is this and this. You multiply this by this, and then you multiply this top by this bottom right. The top left multiplied by the bottom right. The bottom left multiplied by the top right. So that is how you cross multiply. So when I'll represent that by an arrow, that would be 57 times x is 57x. 57x equals 95 times 12. Now, having gotten here, we'll divide both sides by the coefficient of x, which is 57. Divide the left hand side and the right hand side by 57. So 57 will cancel itself out, will remain x on the left hand side. X equals to, when you evaluate this, 95 times 12 divided by 57. So what did you get in your calculator? So try it. 95 times 12 divided by 57. Yeah, we have, my answer here is 20. So that means you've calculated the value of x as 20. That is one method of solving this kind of question. When you are given equality of ratios, you convert first to a fraction like this. 57 ratio 95 was converted to a fraction 57 over 95. 12 ratio x was converted to a fraction 12 over x. So you convert to a fraction first of all whenever you are given a ratio in your examination. So let's move on to another example of a question you might be given to solve in the area of ratios, proportions, and rates. So, but this time around we'll be dealing with let's see about that. Okay, let's deal with rates instead of proportions. Let's start from rates. So after ratios we deal with rates. So in rates is basically the quantity of the amount of something in a given per another quantity. So rate is basically a particular quantity given in terms of another quantity. So for example, a very good example of rate is the speed of your car. So if you drive a car and you are going on a highway, then you will see on your speedometer, you will see the speed of the car, and that speed of the car is like an example of a rate. So it measures the distance covered with respect to the time taken. So your speed is distance over time. That is an example of rate. So yeah, we'll be dealing with different types of rates, but let me give an example. Find in kilometer per hour the rate at which a car travels if it goes 38.5 kilometer in 35 minutes. So this is very simple. So now let's represent it as this. It goes 38.5 kilometer in 35 minutes. Now we are looking for the speed in kilometer per hour, or the rate in kilometer per hour. So we are looking for 1 hour, not 38 minutes. So let's say 1 hour is 60 minutes, right? That would be 60 minutes. 60 minutes. And then let's put the corresponding speed on the left hand side. Sorry, let's put the corresponding distance on the left hand side to be x. So if the distance on the left hand side is x, we can cross multiply this equation. So x times 35, x times 35, that's 35x. 35x equals, so using that same method of cross multiplication we used here, this cross multiplication, let's use it here. So x times 35 is 35x. 38.5 times 60, that would give so when you do everything like that, that would give 38 times 2 is 76. 76 plus 1 77. 77 over 2 times 60, that's 77 over 2 times 60. So I just converted it to an improper fraction. Then 2 into 1, 2 into 60 is 30. So that means 35x is equal to 77 times 30. We can also divide both sides by 35, giving x will be equal to 77 times 30 over 35. So when we cut this one, 7 in 35 is 7. So 7 35 is 5. 7 in 7 is 11. 5 in 5 1. 5 in 30, that's 6. So when 11 times 6 is 66 what kilometer. So that is the solution of the answer. So they said find in kilometer per hour the rate at which a car travels if it goes 38.5 kilometer in 35 minutes. So we just compare that. If 38.5 kilometer is 35 minutes, then what will be 60 minutes? So we cross multiplied and we got that what, which represented as an unknown or a variable, which is called x. So we solved for x and we got it as 66 kilometer. And you can also represent your answer since it is a rate. A rate is basically a comparison between two quantities. So we are comparing kilometer as a unit of distance in respect with hour as a unit of time. So that would be kilometer per hour. 66 kilometer per hour. That would be the speed of that vehicle. So that's how you solve questions on rates. Now let's go to the last section of this video, which will be questions on proportion. Now in questions on proportion, finally we've come to the last section of this video on rates, ratios and proportions. So and then I will solve a question on proportion, which goes thus. Divide 1,170 naira between Bola and Olu so that their shares are in the ratio 8:5. So 8:5 means 8:5. This way, 8:5. So you are asked to divide 1,170 naira, which is the total. That's 1,170 between two people, so that the first person gets 8 units and the second person gets 5 units relative to each other. So what this means is that, so if you divide this into components, the money into components, and you divide it into small units, then the first person will take 8 units relative to the second person. The second person will take 5 units relative to the first person, and that does not mean it has to be 8 and 5. It could be 16 to 10. So that's what the ratio is basically. That is it's a relative amount. So if, for example, what I'm trying to say is that even when you cut a fraction to still give the same answer. For example, 2/3. If I say 2:3, that means the first person takes 2 parts, the second person takes 3 parts. It's still the same thing as 4:6, where the first person takes 4 parts and the second person takes 6 parts. But it's just about equivalence of fractions. So now we're not going to be applying that principle. We're just going to be solving it. So if the first person takes 8 parts and the second person takes 5 parts, that means when you add the whole part, you should be getting the entire money. That means 8 8 times the value of one part plus 5. 8 plus 5 will give us 13 parts. So there are 13 parts in whole. So now if we say let the value of one part be x, so 8 times x plus 5x is equal to 13x. Now using our fraction, let's solve for the first person. The first person takes 8 parts, so his amount will be 8 parts. That will be 8x. 8 times the value of one part divided by the total parts, that will be 13x. 13x times, what's the total amount of money? That's 1,170 naira. So when we evaluate that, that would give us 70. That would give us 700 naira. 700. Then for the second person, we take the value of the ratio. That would be 5x, 5 parts divided by 13 parts. Where the value of one part is x, that's 5x divided by 13x times the total value. That's 1,170. That's the total amount they are sharing. So when we divide that, you can try that, but the answer is 450. So when you solve questions like this, you can also test the validity of your answer. In other words, you can check your answer whether they are correct. So when you do that, you can check through inputting the values of your answer into your ratio, and when you add them together, they must give you your total amount. So that is how you solve ratios. Thank you for watching.